February 12, 1944. The small Belgian village of Libremont lay shrouded in winter mist, its stone buildings standing like ancient sentinels in the half-light of dawn. Lieutenant Thomas Hargrove of the United States Army Signal Corps believed his temporary posting to this backwater village would be nothing more than a footnote in his wartime service, a place to establish communications before moving eastward with the advancing Allied forces. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. What Lieutenant Hargrove couldn't possibly know was that his chance encounter with a desperate Belgian woman would not only alter the course of his war, but potentially influence the outcome of a pivotal Allied operation. The American communications outpost had been established in what was once the village schoolhouse. The children were long gone, evacuated to the countryside when the fighting intensified the previous year. Now, the classrooms housed radio equipment, code books, and a dozen signal specialists working around the clock to maintain the lifeline between command posts and the front lines 30 miles to the east. "Morning, Lieutenant," Sergeant Wilson Cooper said, handing Hargrove a steaming mug of coffee. "Another exciting day in glamorous Libremont." "Don't knock it, Cooper," Hargrove replied, gratefully accepting the coffee. At 32 years old, Thomas Hargrove was older than most of the men under his command. Before the war, he'd worked as an electrical engineer for Bell Telephone in Philadelphia. His expertise had made him a natural fit for the Signal Corps. "I'd take boring over getting shelled any day." Cooper nodded, conceding the point. "Got those requisition forms for you to sign. We're running low on vacuum tubes for the SCR 300 transmitters." Hargrove set down his coffee and reached for his pen. "Get them sent up to HQ today. Last thing we need is to lose communication when the weather turns." The forecast called for heavy snow within 48 hours. Bad weather meant poor visibility for aircraft, which made reliable ground communications all the more critical. The Allied advance had been steady, but hard fought. German resistance remained fierce, even as they were pushed back toward their homeland. "Sir!" Private James Donovan called from his position at the radio desk. Message coming in from Colonel Blackwood, marked urgent. Hargrove crossed the room in 4 strides and took the headset from the young radioman. "This is Lightning 6, go ahead." The voice of Colonel Walter Blackwood, commander of the 305th Signal Battalion, crackled through the static. "Hargrove, we've just received intelligence that German counterintelligence agents may be operating in your sector. They're believed to be targeting our communications infrastructure. Increase security measures immediately. Verification protocols are now in effect for all personnel." "Understood, sir," Hargrove responded. "Any description of these agents?" "Negative. Just be on high alert. Blackwood out." Hargrove handed the headset back to Donovan and turned to face his team. "All right, gentlemen. New protocols effective immediately. No unauthorized personnel in the building. Passwords change every 12 hours instead of 24. And nobody, absolutely nobody, goes anywhere alone, even to the latrine." A chorus of acknowledgements followed. The men of the Signal Corps might not be infantry, but they understood the vital importance of their work. If German agents disrupted communications, American lives would be lost. Outside, the winter wind whistled through the bare trees, carrying with it the distant rumble of artillery fire. The front lines were never truly silent. That same morning, 15 miles to the northeast, Marie Dufour huddled in the basement of a bombed-out farmhouse, clutching a leather satchel to her chest. At 26 years old, she had already witnessed more suffering than most people would in a lifetime. "They are coming," Pierre whispered, peering through a crack in the boarded-up window. "German patrol, 3 vehicles." Marie's heart hammered against her ribs. "How much time do we have?" "Minutes, maybe less." Pierre turned to her, his weathered face grave. "You must go now. Take the western path through the forest. If you follow the stream, it will lead you to Libremont. The Americans have a post there." Marie rose to her feet, adjusting the satchel's strap across her body. "And you?" The old man gave her a sad smile. "Someone must delay them, no? Besides, I am too old to run through forests in winter." "Pierre, go," he insisted, pressing a small pistol into her hand. "Remember what Marcel told you. Trust no one until you reach Major Reynolds. The documents must get to him and him alone. Marie nodded, fighting back tears. Her brother Marcel had died getting these papers out of Brussels. French resistance, Belgian underground, and even sympathetic workers inside German facilities had risked everything to compile the information contained in her satchel. Pierre embraced her quickly. God go with you, child. Marie slipped out through the root cellar and into the cold morning air. The forest loomed before her, dark and forbidding. Behind her she could hear the rumble of approaching vehicles. She did not look back. Instead she ran, her feet crunching on the frozen ground, each exhaled breath visible in the frigid air. The western forest path was little more than a game trail, winding between ancient oak trees and dense underbrush. Marie moved as quickly as she dared, knowing that speed must be balanced against caution. A twisted ankle or broken leg would mean certain capture. She had been moving for perhaps 20 minutes when she heard the first shots, distant pops that echoed through the trees. Pierre. She paused, closing her eyes for just a moment, offering a silent prayer for the old man who had sheltered her. Then she continued westward, tears freezing on her cheeks. Back in Libremont, Lieutenant Hargrove supervised as his men implemented the new security measures. Sandbags were positioned around the building's entrances. The single road leading to the schoolhouse was now blocked by a checkpoint, manned by 2 soldiers with a machine gun. If Colonel Blackwood is concerned enough to radio a warning, this must be serious, Hargrove told Cooper as they inspected the perimeter. German desperation, Cooper suggested. They're losing ground every week. Might be trying to slow us down by taking out communications. Hargrove nodded thoughtfully. Makes sense. Still, seems like a lot of effort for a temporary outpost like ours. Unless they know something we don't, Cooper said. The thought lingered uncomfortably in Hargrove's mind as he continued his inspection. Their position in Libremont was supposed to be a low-priority assignment, important enough to maintain, but not critical to the overall advance. Why would German agents target them specifically? The answer came 3 hours later, in the form of a coded message from Allied command. Hargrove decoded it himself, his expression growing increasingly serious as the message took shape on the paper before him. Operation Jackknife, a major Allied offensive planned for the coming week. The 305th Signal Battalion would serve as the primary communications hub, coordinating between air support, artillery and ground forces. What had seemed like a backwater assignment was suddenly the nerve center of a critical operation, and somehow the Germans knew. Hargrove immediately ordered additional security measures. No one outside the command team was to be informed of Operation Jackknife. All incoming and outgoing messages would be personally verified by either himself or Sergeant Cooper. As dusk approached, the promised snowfall began, light at first but steadily intensifying. Hargrove stood at the window of what had once been the headmaster's office, watching the snowflakes swirl in the gathering darkness. The village looked peaceful, almost serene. It was hard to believe they were in the midst of the largest conflict in human history. A movement at the edge of the forest caught his attention. A figure, small and seemingly unsteady, emerged from the tree line. Even from a distance, Hargrove could tell the person was struggling, stumbling through the deepening snow. "Cooper," he called. "Someone's coming from the west." The sergeant joined him at the window, raising a pair of binoculars to his eyes. "Looks like a woman, sir, civilian. She doesn't look good." Hargrove grabbed his coat. "Get a medic and keep your sidearm ready." Minutes later, Hargrove and Cooper, accompanied by Private Michael Hayes, the unit's medic, cautiously approached the stumbling figure. As they drew closer, Hargrove could see it was indeed a woman, young, dark-haired and clearly exhausted. Her clothing was inadequate for the harsh weather, a thin coat over what appeared to be a dress, and shoes that were practically falling apart. "Ma'am," Hargrove called out in English, then remembering where they were, switched to his rudimentary French. "Madame, êtes-vous blessée?" The woman looked up, her face pale with cold and fatigue. "American?" she asked in accented English. "Yes, ma'am, Lieutenant Thomas Hargrove, United States Army." Relief washed over her features before her eyes rolled back and she collapsed into the snow. Hargrove rushed forward, catching her before her head hit the ground. She was alarmingly light in his arms, and freezing cold to the touch. "She's hypothermic," Hayes said, checking her pulse. "We need to get her inside now." Cooper eyed the woman suspiciously. "Sir, considering the warning about German agents." "She'll be searched and questioned once she's stable," Hargrove said firmly. "I'm not leaving a civilian to freeze to death." They carried her back to the schoolhouse, drawing curious looks from the soldiers manning the perimeter. Inside, Hayes directed them to place her on a cot in the small room they designated as a medical station. "Get those wet clothes off her," the medic instructed, "and find as many blankets as you can." Hargrove nodded to the female radio operator, Specialist Ruth Bennett, who had joined them. "Assist Private Hayes, please. Cooper and I will wait outside." In the hallway, Cooper voiced the concern that both men shared. "The timing is suspicious, sir." "I'm aware, Sergeant." Hargrove ran a hand through his hair. "Once she's stable, we'll need to verify her identity and story. Have Specialist Rousseau ready for translation if needed, though she seemed to understand English." 20 minutes later, Bennett emerged from the medical room. "She's conscious, sir. Private Hayes says her core temperature is coming up, but she's severely dehydrated and exhausted." "Did you find anything on her?" "A leather satchel, sir. She wouldn't let go of it at first, but I managed to convince her we needed to get her dry. It's still in there with her." Hargrove nodded. "Thank you, Specialist. I'll speak with her now." The woman was propped up on the cot, wrapped in blankets. Some color had returned to her cheeks, but her eyes remained wary, darting around the room as if mapping escape routes. The leather satchel sat beside her, one hand resting protectively upon it. "How are you feeling?" Hargrove asked, keeping his distance to avoid intimidating her. "Better. Thank you." Her English was good, though heavily accented. "You are the commander here?" "I'm Lieutenant Hargrove, yes. This is my outpost." He pulled up a chair and sat down, maintaining a respectful distance. "May I ask your name?" She hesitated, studying his face. Marie Dufour." "And what brings you through the forest in a snowstorm, Miss Dufour?" Her hand tightened on the satchel. "I need to speak with Major William Reynolds. It is very important." Hargrove kept his expression neutral, though his interest was immediately piqued. Major Reynolds was the intelligence officer attached to Colonel Blackwood's headquarters and one of the key planners for Operation Jackknife. "Major Reynolds is not stationed here," Hargrove said carefully. "He's at battalion headquarters about 20 miles south of here." Disappointment and anxiety flashed across her face. "I must reach him as soon as possible. Perhaps I can help. What is your business with Major Reynolds?" Marie shook her head. "I was told to speak only with him. It is for his ears alone." Hargrove considered this. On one hand, Colonel Blackwood's warning about German agents made any unexpected arrival suspicious. On the other hand, if this woman truly had information for Major Reynolds, it could be vital. "Miss Dufour, I understand your caution, but you should know that we've received warnings about German agents in this area. I cannot simply take you to Major Reynolds without verifying your identity and intentions." Fear flickered in her eyes, but also something like recognition. "The Germans, they are looking for me. That is why I must reach Major Reynolds quickly." "Why are they looking for you?" She glanced down at the satchel. "Because of what I carry." Hargrove followed her gaze. "Documents," Marie nodded slowly. "Information about German defenses, troop movements, things that could help the Allied forces." She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "My brother Marcel worked with the resistance. He died getting these papers from Brussels." It could be true. It could also be an elaborate cover story. Hargrove had heard that German intelligence was remarkably sophisticated. "I'll tell you what," he said after a moment. "You rest tonight. In the morning, I'll see about arranging transport to headquarters. In the meantime, I'll send a message to Major Reynolds informing him that you're here." Marie seemed to relax slightly. "Thank you, Lieutenant." Hargrove stood. "Private Hayes will check on you regularly. If you need anything, just ask." Outside the medical room, Cooper was waiting. "What's your assessment, sir?" "I'm not sure," Hargrove admitted. Her story could be legitimate, but given the timing and the connection to Major Reynolds, too convenient, maybe? Hargrove sighed. "Post a guard outside her door, polite but vigilant, and get a message to Major Reynolds immediately. Coded, highest priority." Later that night, as snow continued to fall heavily outside, Hargrove sat at his desk reviewing the day's communications logs. The message to Major Reynolds had been sent, but with the deteriorating weather, there was no telling when they might receive a response. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. "Enter." Private Donovan appeared, looking troubled. "Sir, there's something you should know about our guest." Hargrove set down his pen. "Go on." "I was born in Quebec, sir. My mother was French-Canadian. I speak French fluently." "I'm aware of that, Private. What's your point?" "When she was feverish, sir, she was muttering in French. But her accent—" Donovan hesitated. "It wasn't Belgian or French. To my ear, it sounded German." A chill that had nothing to do with the winter weather ran down Hargrove's spine. "You're certain?" "Not 100%, sir, but enough to be concerned." Hargrove rose from his desk. "Thank you, Donovan. Not a word of this to anyone else." "Yes, sir." After Donovan left, Hargrove paced the small office, weighing his options. If Marie Dufour was indeed a German agent, she represented a significant threat, especially given her interest in Major Reynolds and Operation Jackknife. But if she was legitimate and he detained or mistreated her, he could be interfering with valuable intelligence. The safest course would be to hold her securely until Reynolds could verify her identity. But something about her desperate state, the genuine exhaustion and fear in her eyes, made Hargrove hesitate. His contemplation was interrupted by another knock. This time it was Specialist Bennett. "Sir, she's asking for you, says it's urgent." Hargrove found Marie sitting up in bed, looking stronger than she had earlier. The color had returned to her face and her eyes were clear and alert. "Lieutenant," she said as he entered, "I need to tell you something. Something I did not say before." Hargrove closed the door behind him. "I'm listening. The documents I carry, they contain more than just information about German defenses. They include details about a network of spies operating within Allied territory." She took a deep breath. "One of them is at your battalion headquarters." Hargrove kept his expression carefully neutral. "That's a serious claim." "It is the truth. That is why I must speak with Major Reynolds directly. We do not know who can be trusted." "Including me?" Hargrove asked quietly. Marie met his gaze steadily. "I am trusting you now, am I not?" It was a fair point. Hargrove pulled up the chair and sat down. "Tell me more about these spies." "They are not all German," Marie explained. "Some are local collaborators, people who believe the German forces will ultimately prevail, or who have been coerced through threats to their families." She hesitated. "The agent at your headquarters is highly placed. That is all I know." Hargrove felt a knot forming in his stomach. If true, this explained the German interest in their supposedly low-priority outpost. It wasn't the outpost they were interested in. It was Operation Jackknife. "Why come to me?" he asked. "Why not go directly to headquarters?" "I tried," Marie said simply. "The weather forced me west. And then I saw your outpost." Her expression darkened. "Also, there were German patrols searching the main roads. The forest was safer. It made sense. The heavy snow would make the forest paths difficult, but would also conceal her tracks from pursuers. I need to see what's in that satchel," Hargrove said finally. Marie hesitated, then slowly reached for the leather bag. "I will show you some, but not all. Some pages are encoded specifically for Major Reynolds." She opened the satchel and removed several folded papers, which she handed to Hargrove. They contained detailed maps of German artillery positions along a 20-mile stretch of the front, accompanied by schedules of patrol rotations and ammunition deliveries. "These are dated last week," Hargrove noted, examining the documents. "How did you get this level of detail?" "As I told you, my brother worked with the resistance. He had contacts inside German headquarters in Brussels, cleaning staff, secretaries, even a few sympathetic German officers who had grown disillusioned. The information appeared authentic. The artillery positions corresponded with recent reconnaissance reports, and the level of detail would be difficult to fabricate." "There's more," Marie said, reaching back into the satchel. She withdrew a small folded piece of paper. "This came with a verbal message. The person who gave it to my brother said it was to be delivered to Major Reynolds personally." Hargrove accepted the paper and carefully unfolded it. Inside was a single name, Blackwood. Colonel Walter Blackwood, his commanding officer and the man who had warned him about German agents. Hargrove's mind raced. Could Blackwood be the spy? Or was this an elaborate attempt to sow discord in the Allied command structure? The implications were staggering either way. "When did your brother receive this?" Hargrove asked, his mouth suddenly dry. 3 days ago, just before he was. Marie trailed off, the pain of loss evident in her eyes. Before he was taken. Hargrove carefully refolded the paper and handed it back to her. "I need time to consider this information, and I need to verify your identity. You understand that, right?" Marie nodded solemnly. "I would be suspicious too in your position, but time is short, Lieutenant. The offensive—" She stopped abruptly, realizing what she had revealed. "What do you know about an offensive?" Hargrove asked, his voice hardening. Marie closed her eyes briefly. "Only that one is planned. Soon. The exact details were not shared with us." "Us?" "The Resistance." She looked at him imploringly. "Please, Lieutenant, I am not your enemy." Hargrove stood, his mind churning with conflicting thoughts. "Get some rest, Miss Dufour. We'll continue this discussion in the morning." Outside the medical room, Hargrove instructed the guard to remain vigilant. Then he sought out Sergeant Cooper, finding him in the communications room monitoring the evening radio traffic. "Any response from headquarters?" Hargrove asked. Cooper shook his head. "Nothing yet, sir. The storm's playing havoc with transmissions. We're getting significant interference." Hargrove frowned. "Keep trying, and find Specialist Rousseau for me. I need someone who can verify a Belgian accent versus other European accents. You suspect she's not who she claims to be?" "I don't know what to think, Cooper, but I intend to find out." Later that night, unable to sleep, Hargrove sat in the schoolhouse kitchen drinking coffee and reviewing everything he knew. The facts were these. A mysterious woman had appeared carrying sensitive military information and a possible accusation against his commanding officer. German agents were reportedly in the area, potentially targeting Operation Jackknife, and communications with headquarters were currently compromised by the weather. "Trouble sleeping, sir." Hargrove looked up to see Private Hayes in the doorway. "Just thinking, Hayes. How's our guest?" "Resting comfortably. Her physical condition is improving rapidly." The medic hesitated. "But there's something else you should know." "What is it?" "When I was checking her vitals earlier, I noticed scarring on her wrists, the kind that comes from being restrained, and there are bruises on her back and shoulders that aren't fresh, maybe a week or two old." Hargrove frowned. "You think she was a prisoner?" "It looks that way, sir, and based on the pattern of the bruises—" Hayes paused, clearly uncomfortable. "It appears she was mistreated." The implication hung in the air between them. If Marie had been a German prisoner and escaped, it would support her story. But it still didn't explain Donovan's observation about her accent. "Thank you for telling me, Hayes. Keep this information to yourself for now." "Yes, sir." After Hayes left, Hargrove made a decision. He would continue to treat Marie Dufour as a guest rather than a prisoner, but he would also take prudent security measures. Her satchel would remain with her. Attempting to take it might provoke a reaction that would reveal her true intentions, but the building would remain secured. Most importantly, he would accelerate efforts to contact Major Reynolds. If Reynolds confirmed that he was expecting a courier from the Belgian resistance, that would go a long way toward validating Marie's story. The following morning dawned clear and cold. The snowstorm had passed during the night, leaving behind nearly 2 feet of fresh snow that glittered in the early sunlight. The village of Libremont looked like a scene from a Christmas card, peaceful and pristine. Hargrove had just finished his morning coffee when Cooper approached with a message slip. "From headquarters, sir. They managed to get through about 20 minutes ago." Hargrove scanned the message, his expression revealing nothing. "Thank you, Sergeant. Please inform Miss Dufour that I'd like to speak with her as soon as she's ready." "Yes, sir." Cooper hesitated. "Any instructions regarding her status?" "Continue as before, respectful but vigilant." When Cooper had gone, Hargrove read the message again. It was brief and to the point. "No courier expected. Detained for questioning. Reynolds en route." It seemed to confirm his suspicions, yet something didn't sit right. If Marie was a German agent, why approach a military outpost at all? Why not simply observe from a distance? And the documents she carried, the artillery positions, had been verified against their own intelligence. They were accurate. Hargrove was still pondering these questions when there was a commotion at the front entrance. A moment later, Specialist Bennett appeared, looking concerned. "Sir, there's a German patrol in the village." Hargrove followed her to the window. Sure enough, 3 German vehicles had entered the main street of Libremont, a staff car flanked by 2 transport trucks. They had stopped in the village square, and officers were now speaking with the local civilians. "They're asking about a woman," Bennett said, watching through binoculars, showing photographs to the villagers. Hargrove felt the weight of command pressing down on him. If Marie was telling the truth, and these Germans were pursuing her for the intelligence she carried, then surrendering her would be a grave mistake. But if she was a German agent, and this was an elaborate ploy. "Get Miss Dufour to my office immediately," he ordered, "and tell Cooper to prepare the men. We may need to evacuate." Minutes later, Marie stood before him, visibly agitated after learning of the German presence in the village. "They've found me," she said, clutching her satchel tightly. "We must leave now." "Why would an entire patrol be searching for one courier?" Hargrove asked, studying her reaction closely. "Because of what I know, because of what I carry." She met his gaze directly. "Lieutenant, if they capture me, the information I have will be lost, and your offensive will fail. People will die. Many people." "How do you know about the offensive?" Hargrove pressed. "You mentioned it last night." Marie's expression hardened. "The resistance has ears everywhere, Lieutenant, just as the Germans do. We knew an operation was being planned. We did not know the details, only that it was significant enough that the German command in Brussels was concerned. It was plausible. Intelligence often leaked in fragments, especially in occupied territories where civilian populations were mixed with military forces. "I received a message from headquarters this morning," Hargrove said, watching her carefully. "They say they weren't expecting any courier." Fear flashed across Marie's face, but it was quickly replaced by understanding. "Of course they would say that. If your Colonel Blackwood is the spy, he would want to discredit me." It was a compelling point. If Blackwood was indeed compromised, he would naturally attempt to undermine any threat to his position. "Major Reynolds is on his way here," Hargrove continued. "We should wait for him." "There may not be time," Marie urged, gesturing toward the window where the German patrol could still be seen in the village square. "They are thorough. They will search every building." Hargrove considered the situation. His orders were clear: detain Marie until Reynolds arrived. But if she was telling the truth, and if Colonel Blackwood was indeed compromised, those orders might be part of a larger deception. The weight of command had never felt heavier. Whatever decision he made now would have consequences, potentially grave ones. "Miss Dufour," he said finally, "I'm going to trust you, but I need you to trust me in return." Relief washed over her features. "What do you propose?" "I'm not going to hand you over to the Germans, but I'm also not going to flee with you, not yet." Hargrove leaned forward. "First, I want to see everything in that satchel, every document. Then I'll decide our next move." Marie hesitated, her hand tightening on the leather bag. "Some of it is encoded. It won't mean anything to you." "Show me anyway." After a long moment, she nodded. "Very well." Marie placed the satchel on Hargrove's desk and carefully removed its contents. There were more detailed maps showing German defensive positions, handwritten notes in French detailing troop movements, and several photographs of military installations taken from concealed positions. Most significantly, there was a thin folder containing what appeared to be internal German communications, some original documents, others hastily photographed and developed in makeshift darkrooms. "This one," Marie said, pointing to a document written in German, "contains orders for repositioning artillery batteries in anticipation of an Allied advance through this sector." She indicated an area on one of the maps that corresponded precisely with the planned route for Operation Jackknife. Hargrove felt a chill. The Germans knew more than they should about Allied plans. "And this," Marie continued, pulling out a small notebook with pages of seemingly random numbers and letters, "is the encoded information about the spy network." My brother said this part was specifically for Major Reynolds. He has the key to decode it. Hargrove examined the notebook. The entries were meaningless to him, rows of alphanumeric sequences with no discernible pattern. If this was a code, it was a sophisticated one. "There's one more thing," Marie said quietly. She reached into an inner pocket of the satchel and removed a small, folded piece of paper. "This was sewn into the lining. My brother said it was the most important piece, proof of Colonel Blackwood's involvement." Hargrove accepted the paper with trepidation. Unfolding it revealed a photograph, grainy and slightly out of focus, but clear enough to recognize Colonel Walter Blackwood seated at a cafe table across from a man in civilian clothes. The two appeared to be in deep conversation, documents spread between them. "The other man is Dieter Hoffmann," Marie explained. "He works for German counterintelligence." Hargrove studied the photograph. It could be damning evidence, or it could be completely innocent. Military intelligence officers often met with various contacts, some of questionable character. "When was this taken?" he asked. 2 weeks ago, in Brussels." That was troubling. Blackwood had no official reason to be in Brussels 2 weeks ago. According to the battalion records, he had been on leave, supposedly visiting family in Luxembourg. "There's more," Marie added. "My brother said Blackwood has been passing information for months. Details of troop movements, supply convoys, planned operations. The Germans always seem to know where to strike for maximum effect." It was true that the battalion had experienced several costly setbacks in recent months, supply lines ambushed, forward positions overrun, as if the enemy had advanced knowledge of vulnerabilities. Hargrove gathered the documents and returned them to Marie, who carefully repacked the satchel. "If what you're saying is true," Hargrove said, "then Blackwood's warning about German agents was meant to misdirect us, to make us suspicious of the wrong people." Marie nodded gravely. "While he continues to betray your forces from within." Outside, the German patrol was methodically working its way through the village, going door to door. It would not be long before they reached the schoolhouse. Hargrove made his decision. "We need to get you to Major Reynolds, but not by the main roads. They'll be watching those." "There is another way," Marie suggested, "through the forest to the southwest. It connects to a secondary road that leads to Neufchâteau. From there we could reach your headquarters." "It's risky," Hargrove warned. "The forest will be difficult to navigate after the snowfall." "I grew up in these forests," Marie said with quiet confidence. "Snow or no snow, I can find the way." Hargrove nodded. "All right. I'll accompany you with a small security detail, Cooper and one other soldier. The rest of the unit will remain here to maintain normal operations. That way, if the Germans do search the building, everything will appear routine." "When do we leave?" Hargrove glanced out the window at the German patrol, now just 3 buildings away from the schoolhouse. "Now, get your things. Meet me at the rear entrance in 5 minutes." While Marie gathered her belongings, Hargrove briefed Sergeant Cooper and selected Private Donovan as the 3rd member of their party. Both men were reliable and, crucially, good in difficult terrain. "Sir," Cooper asked quietly, "are you certain about this? If headquarters ordered us to detain her—" "I'm not certain of anything, Cooper," Hargrove admitted. "But I've seen enough to convince me that her story merits investigation. And if there's even a small chance that Colonel Blackwood is compromised, we can't risk sending messages that might be intercepted." Cooper nodded, accepting the reasoning. "What about the rest of the unit?" "Lieutenant Madison will take temporary command. Tell him to cooperate fully if the Germans search the building. We have nothing to hide." 5 minutes later, Hargrove, Cooper, Donovan, and Marie slipped out through the rear entrance of the schoolhouse. They wore white snow capes over their uniforms for camouflage, and each carried a sidearm and basic survival supplies. Marie had her satchel securely fastened across her body. The forest began about a quarter-mile behind the village, a dense wall of pine and oak that stretched for miles. Once among the trees, they would be difficult to track, especially with fresh snow covering the ground. "Stay close," Hargrove instructed as they moved across the open ground between the village and the tree line, "and stay low." They had covered perhaps half the distance when a shout rang out behind them. Turning, Hargrove saw a German soldier pointing in their direction from the edge of the village. "Run!" he ordered, abandoning stealth for speed. They sprinted for the trees as shots rang out behind them. The Germans were too far away for accurate fire, but the element of surprise was lost. By the time they reached the forest's edge, Hargrove could hear vehicle engines starting up. "They're mobilizing the patrol," Cooper warned. "How far to the secondary road?" Hargrove asked Marie as they pushed deeper into the forest. 3 miles, perhaps 4 in these conditions. We need to move southwest." Hargrove checked his compass. "This way, keep moving." The forest was beautiful but treacherous. Fresh snow concealed fallen logs and uneven ground. Several times they nearly lost their footing on hidden obstacles. The cold was intense, seeping through their clothing despite their exertion. Behind them they could hear distant voices and the occasional barking of dogs. The Germans had brought tracking dogs, a complication Hargrove had hoped to avoid. "The snow will slow them down," Cooper said, reading Hargrove's concern, "and mask our scent somewhat." "Not enough," Hargrove replied grimly. "We need to move faster." They pressed on, the forest growing denser around them. Marie moved with surprising agility, finding paths through the undergrowth that were not immediately apparent. Despite her recent ordeal, she showed remarkable stamina. After an hour of hard travel, they paused briefly to catch their breath and check their bearings. The sounds of pursuit had faded, but Hargrove knew that didn't mean the Germans had given up. "We're making good progress," Marie said, consulting a small map she had produced from her satchel. "Another hour should bring us to the road." Hargrove nodded, impressed by her composure under pressure. "You've done this before, haven't you? Evaded pursuers through difficult terrain." A hint of a smile crossed her face. "The resistance does not survive by being easy to catch, Lieutenant." They continued their journey, the forest gradually sloping downward as they approached a shallow valley. Here the trees thinned somewhat, offering better visibility but less cover. "We should avoid the valley floor," Cooper suggested. "Better to keep to the higher ground where the trees are thicker." Hargrove was about to agree when Marie stopped abruptly, raising a hand for silence. They froze, listening intently. At first Hargrove heard nothing but the soft whisper of wind through the trees. Then, faintly but distinctly, came the sound of an engine. "Vehicle on the road ahead," Marie whispered. Hargrove signaled for everyone to take cover. They crouched behind a fallen tree, peering cautiously toward the sound. Through the sparse trees, they could make out a stretch of the very road they had been trying to reach. A German patrol vehicle was parked at a curve, 2 soldiers standing beside it scanning the forest. "They've anticipated our route," Hargrove murmured. "We'll need to find another way." Marie studied her map. "There's a stream about half a mile east of here. It runs south toward Neufchâteau. We could follow it." "They'll expect that too," Cooper pointed out. "Streams are natural navigation aids." Hargrove considered their options. "We need to split up." "Sir?" Cooper looked concerned. "Not permanently, just to create a diversion." Hargrove turned to Donovan. "You and Cooper head east toward the stream. Make sure you're seen by that patrol. Lead them away for about a mile. Then circle back north and return to the outpost." "And you, sir?" Cooper asked. "Marie and I will continue south through the valley while the Germans are distracted. We'll make for Neufchâteau by a more direct route." Cooper frowned. "With respect, sir, that's very risky. If you're captured, then you'll be free to report to Major Reynolds what we've learned." Hargrove's tone made it clear the decision was final. Marie's information needs to reach headquarters one way or another. Cooper reluctantly nodded. "Yes, sir. Good luck." "Wait until we're in position," Hargrove instructed. "Give us 15 minutes, then make your move, and Cooper, stay safe." Marie and Hargrove moved carefully down the slope, using the trees for cover as they made their way toward the valley floor. Once there, they would have about half a mile of relatively open ground to cross before reaching the denser forest on the southern side. "Are you sure about this plan?" Marie asked quietly, as they positioned themselves for the dash across the valley. "Not entirely," Hargrove admitted. "But sometimes the most dangerous path is also the least expected." From their position, they could still see the German patrol on the road. 2 more soldiers had emerged from the woods to join the original pair. They appeared to be discussing something, occasionally gesturing toward different sections of the forest. "They're coordinating search patterns," Hargrove observed, "trying to anticipate which way we'll go." 15 minutes passed slowly. Then, right on schedule, there was a commotion from the eastern forest. Cooper and Donovan had made their presence known. The German soldiers immediately reacted, running back to their vehicle and heading east along the road. "Now," Hargrove said. They emerged from cover and moved quickly across the valley floor, staying low and using whatever vegetation they could for concealment. The snow was deeper here, slowing their progress, but they pushed forward relentlessly. They were 3/4 of the way across when the crack of a rifle shot split the air. A bullet whizzed past Hargrove's head, embedding itself in a tree trunk just inches away. "Sniper," he hissed, pulling Marie down into the snow. "On the ridge." Another shot followed, closer this time. The sniper had their range. "We can't stay here," Marie said, her voice remarkably steady despite the danger. "We're exposed." Hargrove scanned their surroundings. The southern forest edge was still 100 yards away, too far to reach without being hit. But about 50 yards to their left was a cluster of large boulders that might provide temporary shelter. "The rocks," he said. "When I count to 3, run for them. Zigzag pattern." Marie nodded, tension evident in her face, but determination in her eyes. 1, 2, 3. They sprang up and ran, changing direction every few steps. The sniper fired twice more, both shots missing by narrow margins. They reached the boulders and dove behind them, breathing heavily. "Are you hit?" Hargrove asked, checking Marie for injuries. "No. You?" "I'm fine." Hargrove peered cautiously around the edge of the boulder. He could see the ridge where the sniper was positioned, but not the sniper himself. "We're pinned down. He has the high ground and clear lines of fire to the forest edge." Marie pulled her map from the satchel. "There's a ravine about 200 yards west of here. It runs all the way to the southern forest. If we could reach it." 200 yards is a long way with a sniper watching," Hargrove said grimly. "I'll draw his fire," Marie said suddenly. "You make for the ravine." Hargrove looked at her in surprise. "Absolutely not. Lieutenant, the documents I carry must reach Major Reynolds. That is what matters, not me." "Both matter," Hargrove said firmly, "and I'm not leaving you behind. We go together or not at all." Marie studied his face for a moment, then nodded. "Then we need another solution." Hargrove thought quickly. "The sniper is watching this position. He expects us to make a break for the forest. But if we move west along the boulders, staying in cover as much as possible, we might reach that ravine without exposing ourselves too much." It was a risky plan, but their options were limited. The temperature was dropping as afternoon waned, and they couldn't remain exposed indefinitely. "Let's move," Hargrove said. "Stay low and follow my lead." They began working their way westward, using the scattered boulders and occasional stunted trees for cover. The sniper fired periodically, more to keep them pinned down than with any real hope of hitting them at their current position. Progress was slow and tense. Several times they had to dash across open spaces, drawing fire but thankfully remaining unscathed. The ravine, when they finally reached it, was a blessing. A deep, natural trench carved by centuries of spring runoff, now partially filled with snow, but still offering excellent cover. They slid down into its depths, finding themselves suddenly sheltered from both the sniper's view and the biting wind. "We made it," Marie said, relief evident in her voice. "Part 1 of the plan, anyway." Hargrove checked his compass. "The ravine runs southeast, not precisely our intended direction, but it will take us away from the sniper and eventually to the forest." They moved as quickly as they could through the ravine, which varied in depth from 6 to 15 feet. In some places, they had to climb over fallen trees or large rocks that had tumbled down from the surrounding slopes. As they traveled, Hargrove found himself increasingly impressed by Marie's resilience. Despite her recent ordeal, despite the cold and danger, she kept pace without complaint. "May I ask you something?" he said as they paused briefly to consult the map. "Of course. How did you become involved in the resistance?" Marie was quiet for a moment. "My father was a professor of history at the University of Brussels. When the occupation began, he spoke out against it. He was arrested in 1940. We never saw him again." "I'm sorry." She nodded acknowledgement. "After that, my brother Marcel joined the resistance. I followed a year later. It seemed the only meaningful response to what had happened. And your mother? She died before the war. It was just Marcel and me. A shadow crossed her face. And now, it is just me. Hargrove wanted to offer comfort, but knew that no words could adequately address such loss. Instead, he simply said, "Your family would be proud of your courage." Marie gave him a small, sad smile. Perhaps. Though I think they would prefer if we had all lived in less interesting times. They continued through the ravine, which gradually became shallower as they approached the forest edge. Eventually, they reached a point where it was no more than a shallow depression in the ground, no longer offering adequate cover. "We'll have to make a run for the trees," Hargrove said. "The sniper may have repositioned by now." The forest edge was about 70 yards away, a short sprint under normal circumstances, but potentially fatal with a sniper in the area. There was no way to know if they were still being watched. "Ready?" Hargrove asked. Marie nodded, adjusting the strap of her satchel to ensure it wouldn't bounce as she ran. "Go!" They burst from the ravine, running full tilt toward the protective cover of the trees. Hargrove half expected to hear the crack of a rifle at any moment, but no shot came. They reached the forest unharmed, diving behind the first substantial tree trunk they encountered. "We made it!" Marie gasped, catching her breath. Hargrove scanned the ridge where the sniper had been positioned. No movement was visible. Either we lost him, or he's waiting for a clearer shot. Or he was called away to join the search elsewhere, Marie suggested. The forest is large, and they cannot know exactly where we are headed. It was a hopeful thought, and Hargrove wanted to believe it. "Let's keep moving. Neufchâteau is still several miles away." They proceeded through the forest with caution, alert for any signs of pursuit. The terrain became more rugged, with steep inclines and rocky outcroppings that slowed their progress, but also provided better concealment. As twilight approached, the temperature dropped further. Their breath formed visible clouds in the frigid air, and fatigue began to take its toll. Marie, despite her determination, was visibly flagging. "We should rest briefly," Hargrove suggested, noticing her increasing difficulty. "No," Marie insisted. "We must reach Neufchâteau before dark." "You won't reach anywhere if you collapse from exhaustion," Hargrove said gently but firmly. 10 minutes, that's all." Marie reluctantly agreed. They found a sheltered spot beneath an outcropping of rock, somewhat protected from the wind. Hargrove removed a small flask from his pack and offered it to Marie. "It's not much, but it should help with the cold." She accepted the flask and took a small sip, the brandy bringing immediate color to her cheeks. "Thank you." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, gathering their strength for the journey ahead. Despite the circumstances, or perhaps because of them, Hargrove felt a growing connection to this remarkable woman. Her courage and determination were extraordinary, especially given all she had endured. "May I ask you something now, Lieutenant?" Marie said, interrupting his thoughts. "Of course. Why did you believe me back at the outpost when others might have been more suspicious?" Hargrove considered the question carefully. "I'm not sure I can explain it rationally. Your story had inconsistencies, yes, but there was an authenticity to your exhaustion, your fear, that would have been difficult to fabricate, and the intelligence you carried, it aligned with what we already knew." Marie studied him with a thoughtful expression. Not many men would trust their instincts over direct orders. "Sometimes instincts are all we have." Hargrove checked his watch. "We should move. We still have a lot of ground to cover." They resumed their journey, the forest growing darker as evening approached. Navigation became more challenging, requiring frequent compass checks to maintain their southward heading. The cold intensified, seeping through their clothing despite their exertion. "Tell me about Philadelphia," Marie said as they walked, her voice betraying her fatigue. "What is it like in peacetime?" Hargrove recognized her attempt to stay alert through conversation. "It's a beautiful city, historic. The streets of the old town still have cobblestones, and there are buildings that date back to colonial times. In the spring, the parks fill with flowers, and people gather for concerts in the bandstands." "It sounds peaceful." "It is. Or it was." Hargrove helped her over a fallen log. "When this is over, you should visit. I could show you Independence Hall, where our democracy began." "I would like that," Marie said softly, "when this is over." They continued in silence for a time, each lost in thoughts of a future without war. The forest had become almost entirely dark now, forcing them to move more slowly to avoid injury on the uneven ground. "Look," Marie said suddenly, pointing ahead. Lights. Through the trees, they could see the distant glow of Neufchâteau. They had nearly reached their destination. "We made it," Hargrove said, relief evident in his voice. "Now we just need to enter the town without attracting attention and find transportation to headquarters." "It will not be easy," Marie cautioned. "The Germans will have checkpoints on all main roads. We'll find a way." Hargrove checked his map. "There's a staging area for Allied transport on the western edge of town. If we can reach it, we should be able to secure a vehicle." They approached the town cautiously, staying within the tree line as they circled toward the western sector. As they drew closer, they could see military activity, vehicles coming and going, soldiers moving about on various assignments. Hargrove studied the perimeter through his binoculars. "There's our ticket," he said, indicating a supply truck being loaded with crates. "Looks like it's preparing to depart, probably headed for one of the forward bases." "How do we reach it?" Marie asked. "There are guards everywhere." Hargrove considered the problem. "We need a distraction." Before he could elaborate, the decision was made for them. The air raid sirens in Neufchâteau began to wail, their eerie sound carrying clearly through the cold night air. "Aircraft approaching from the east," Hargrove observed, looking up at the darkened sky. "German or Allied, I can't tell." "Does it matter?" Marie asked pragmatically. "Either way, it's the distraction we need." She was right. The base had erupted into activity. Soldiers were running to their defensive positions, vehicles were being moved under cover, and lights were being extinguished. In the confusion, 2 more figures would hardly be noticed. "Now's our chance," Hargrove said. "Stay close to me." They emerged from the forest and moved quickly across the open ground to the perimeter fence. A section had been temporarily removed to allow vehicle access, and in the commotion of the air raid warning, the usual guard had abandoned his post. They slipped through the opening and made their way toward the supply truck, which was now only partially loaded, its crew having sought shelter from the potential bombing. "Can you drive?" Hargrove asked as they approached the vehicle. "Yes." "Good. You'll take the wheel, I'll navigate." Hargrove helped her into the driver's seat, then circled around to the passenger side. The keys were still in the ignition, standard procedure for quick evacuation if needed. Marie started the engine just as the first aircraft became visible overhead. Searchlights from the base swept the sky, illuminating the distinctive silhouette of Allied bombers. "Ours," Hargrove confirmed, "probably headed for targets further east." They drove toward the exit, Hargrove saluting casually to the guards, who were much more concerned with the aircraft overhead than with the departing supply truck. Minutes later, they were on the main road heading south toward Allied headquarters. "We did it," Marie said, her hands steady on the wheel despite her exhaustion. "We actually did it." Hargrove allowed himself a small smile. "We're not there yet. But yes, the hard part is over." They drove in companionable silence for a time, the rhythmic hum of the engine and the darkness of the countryside creating an almost peaceful atmosphere. After all they had been through, the simple act of driving down an open road felt like a luxury. "Lieutenant," Marie said eventually, "what happens when we reach your headquarters? If Colonel Blackwood is truly compromised?" "Then we'll need to be careful," Hargrove finished her thought. "We go directly to Major Reynolds. No one else." Marie nodded, her expression resolute. "I understand." 2 hours later, they approached the Allied headquarters, a sprawling complex housed in what had once been a luxury resort hotel. Security was tight, with multiple checkpoints and armed guards at all entrances. "Let me do the talking," Hargrove instructed as they approached the first checkpoint. The guard stepped forward, raising a hand for them to stop. Identification. Hargrove presented his military ID. "Lieutenant Thomas Hargrove, 305th Signal Battalion. I have urgent intelligence for Major William Reynolds." The guard examined his identification carefully. "And the civilian?" "A courier with critical information. Major Reynolds is expecting us." After a moment's hesitation, the guard stepped back and waved them through. Park in the service area and report to the main security desk. They followed the instructions, parking the truck among other supply vehicles before making their way to the hotel's grand entrance. Despite the late hour, the headquarters buzzed with activity. The nerve center of the Allied advance operated around the clock. At the security desk, they were met with more thorough scrutiny. Hargrove repeated his request to see Major Reynolds, emphasizing the urgency of their mission. "Major Reynolds is in a briefing, sir," the duty officer informed them. "But I can send word that you've arrived." "Please do," Hargrove said, "and tell him it concerns Operation Jackknife." The mention of the classified operation name had the desired effect. The officer immediately picked up a telephone and spoke briefly, his expression growing increasingly serious as the conversation progressed. "Major Reynolds will see you immediately, sir," he said after hanging up. "Fourth floor, room 412. I'll have someone escort you." A young corporal appeared to guide them through the labyrinthine corridors of the converted hotel. As they walked, Hargrove remained alert for any sign of Colonel Blackwood or his staff. If Blackwood learned of their arrival before they reached Reynolds, the consequences could be severe. The corporal led them to a nondescript door and knocked. A voice from within called for them to enter. Major William Reynolds was a compact, intense man with keen eyes and a reputation for brilliance in intelligence analysis. He rose from behind his desk as they entered, dismissing the corporal with a nod. "Lieutenant Hargrove," he said, his tone carefully neutral, "this is unexpected. Colonel Blackwood reported that you were maintaining position in Libramont." "The situation changed, sir," Hargrove replied. "May I present Marie Dufour? She has intelligence that you need to see immediately." Reynolds turned his attention to Marie, studying her with the practiced eye of a man accustomed to evaluating both information and its bearers. "Miss Dufour, I understand you have something for me?" Marie stepped forward and opened her satchel. "My brother was Marcel Dufour of the Belgian resistance. He was captured and executed by the Germans 3 days ago. Before his death, he entrusted me with these documents and instructed me to deliver them directly to you." She placed the contents of the satchel on Reynolds's desk, the maps, the photographs, the coded notebook, and finally, the photograph of Colonel Blackwood with the German intelligence officer. Reynolds examined each item carefully, his expression revealing nothing. When he came to the photograph, he paused, studying it intently before setting it aside. "Your brother was a brave man, Miss Dufour. His work saved many lives." Reynolds looked up at her with genuine respect. "And you have shown extraordinary courage in completing his mission." "Then you believe us?" Hargrove asked. "About Colonel Blackwood?" Reynolds sighed heavily. "We've suspected a leak at high levels for some time. Too many operations compromised, too many supply convoys ambushed. The evidence was circumstantial until now." "What will happen?" Marie asked. "Colonel Blackwood will be quietly detained and questioned. The evidence you've provided will be thoroughly investigated." Reynolds picked up the coded notebook. "This may be the most valuable piece of all. If it contains what I think it does, the full network of German agents in our territory, it could change the course of our advance." "And Operation Jackknife?" Hargrove asked. "Will proceed, but with significant modifications to ensure security." Reynolds looked at them both with gratitude. "You've done a tremendous service today, one that many will never know about, but that may save countless lives." Marie nodded, accepting the praise with quiet dignity. The exhaustion of the past days was finally catching up to her, visible in the slight slump of her shoulders and the shadows beneath her eyes. Reynolds noticed. "You both need rest. I'll have quarters arranged immediately. Tomorrow, Miss Dufour, we'll need to debrief you fully on everything you know." "Of course," she agreed. "And Lieutenant," Reynolds added, "I'll need a complete report from you as well. Your decision to trust Miss Dufour over direct orders was unorthodox, but ultimately correct. That kind of judgment is valuable." "Thank you, sir," Hargrove replied, feeling the tension of the past days finally beginning to ease. Later, after Marie had been escorted to guest quarters and Hargrove had completed an initial debriefing with Reynolds' staff, the two Americans found themselves alone in the Major's office once more. "There's something you should know, Lieutenant," Reynolds said, pouring 2 glasses of whiskey and offering one to Hargrove. The intelligence Miss Dufour brought us extends beyond Colonel Blackwood and Operation Jackknife. Hargrove accepted the drink. Sir? The coded notebook contains details of German defensive preparations along a 100-mile stretch of their western front. Vulnerabilities, supply limitations, command hierarchies. It's extraordinarily valuable. Then her brother's sacrifice and hers may have an even greater impact than we realized. Precisely. Reynolds raised his glass in a small toast. To the courage of those who fight from the shadows. Hargrove echoed the sentiment, the whiskey burning pleasantly as he swallowed. What will happen to her now, sir? Marie has lost everything, her brother, her home. Reynolds considered the question. That will largely be up to her. With her knowledge and experience, she would be an asset to our intelligence operations, or if she prefers, we could arrange safe passage to England, or perhaps America. I think she would do well in Philadelphia, Hargrove said, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. When the war is over, Reynolds raised an eyebrow but made no comment on the personal nature of the observation. Get some rest, Lieutenant. You've earned it. The following morning, Hargrove found Marie in the headquarters' small garden, sitting on a bench beneath a bare oak tree. Despite the cold, she seemed to relish being outdoors in the peaceful setting. She looked up as he approached, a genuine smile warming her features. Lieutenant Hargrove, I think after everything we've been through, you might call me Thomas, he suggested, sitting beside her. Thomas, she agreed, and I am Marie, not Miss Dufour. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching their breath form clouds in the winter air. Major Reynolds told me about the notebook, Hargrove said eventually, about how valuable it is. Marie nodded. Marcel would be pleased to know his work continues to help the Allied cause. Reynolds also mentioned that you have options for what comes next, intelligence work, or perhaps relocation to a safer location. What would you suggest? She asked, watching his face closely. Hargrove chose his words carefully. I think you would make an exceptional intelligence officer. Your courage and quick thinking are remarkable, but I also think you deserve a chance at a normal life after all you've endured. A normal life, Marie repeated thoughtfully. I'm not sure I remember what that is. Neither do any of us, I suppose. But someday this war will end. And when it does, we'll all have to relearn peace. Hargrove hesitated, then added, My offer to show you Philadelphia still stands, when that day comes. Marie's smile deepened. I think I would like that very much. In the weeks that followed, Marie worked closely with Allied intelligence, helping to decode the notebook and providing valuable context for the information it contained. Colonel Blackwood was quietly removed from command, and subsequent investigation revealed the full extent of his betrayal. Operation Jackknife, modified based on Marie's intelligence, proceeded successfully in late March, breaking through German defenses with minimal casualties. And through it all, Lieutenant Thomas Hargrove remained at Marie's side, first as her liaison to the Allied command, then as her friend, and eventually as something more. Their shared experience had forged a bond that transcended the circumstances of their meeting. When the war finally ended in 1945, Thomas Hargrove kept his promise. Marie Dufour saw Philadelphia in the springtime, when the parks were filled with flowers and the bandstands hosted concerts once again. She found it every bit as peaceful as he had described during their desperate journey through the Belgian forest. They were married in June of 1946 in a small ceremony attended by several of Hargrove's former Signal Corps comrades, including Sergeant Cooper and Private Donovan. Major Reynolds, by then promoted to colonel, served as best man. Marie never returned to Belgium permanently, though they visited several times over the years to place flowers on her brother's grave. The leather satchel that had once carried secrets that changed the course of the war was preserved in their home, a reminder of how their lives had intersected at a crucial moment in history. Thomas Hargrove often reflected on the extraordinary chain of events that had brought them together. A chance encounter in a small Belgian village, a decision to trust instinct over orders, a desperate journey through snowy forests, all leading to a life he could never have imagined during those dark days of war, and all because an American soldier took in a woman escaping the Germans. Unaware she carried secret documents that would change everything. And that concludes our story. If you made it this far, please share your thoughts in the comments. What part of this historical account surprised you most? Don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from World War II and check out the video on screen for another incredible tale from history. Until next time.